Hello, everybody, and welcome. You've made it to most of the way through the day. We have this session and one more in our wind up, and I hope it's been a good day for you, and that you've learned a lot, and that you've been
Hey.
prompted to just
Oh, sorry, Ken. We couldn't hear you, but I think it's working now. I apologize.
okay. Well, I'll just say hello again to everybody, and I just started to say you've made it now through most of the day. They have this session and one more, and then a wrap up. I hope you will stay for our wrap up. There will be some more prizes. We'll be highlighting some things that are upcoming. So it'll just last 5 or 10 minutes. So please hang around for that. And please complete the polls at the end of this session as well, so I don't forget to say that. So we're going to dive into a obviously hot topic. Who isn't talking about AI these days? And we're going to spend most of our time on that. Because I am responsible for Accelerate 2025, if you don't mind, I'd like to take just a minute to use you for a little bit of research. This is going to be easy, so don't freak out. But I want you to think about the role that you're in your company. And in the chat, in whatever role you're in, first of all, maybe just put your role, CEO, HR leader, or something like that. And I just, in a few words, if you were describing this event to somebody that you know, a peer, if you're a CEO, you're describing another peer, you say, I was at this event the other day, and it was helpful because, and then just fill in that blank. What did you find helpful about today? If you did find it helpful, and I'm going to assume if you're still here, you probably did find some things helpful. So just looking for some words and phrases that kind of describe why you found this helpful. We're always trying to find the right words to describe for our audience what benefit they're going to get for something like this. So that's what I'm looking for there. And we're not going to take time to read them right now because I'll read them afterwards. This, like I said, just research. And then a similar question is, if you were you were creating an ad for this event, for example, and you had 1 to 3 words that you wanted to use to describe it, and because you thought it was good, what words would you use to describe it? If you wouldn't mind just plugging that into the chat, then we'll be able to capture that afterwards. And like I say, that's just a little bit of research for me, and I appreciate you indulging me. Okay, so to the topic at hand, AI-led pay design, where AI is helpful and where it is not. Like every other aspect of business and personal life, we see AI being used by companies as it relates to their compensation issues, sometimes trying to use it as a shortcut, sometimes successfully, sometimes doing some damage. So we'd like to help prevent any of that damage for you today by giving you some guidance on some things. But here's the goal today. 4 things. Provide some perspective about what we're dealing with here. Where are we in this AI world and context as it relates to compensation? What kind of expectations should you be able to set here? I would like to increase your understanding a little bit about how it works. I don't want to be condescending there, but I think for most of it, we're still trying to kind of figure that out. The more we understand about how it works, the more we can have it become our ally. The less we know how it works, the more there's potential for its limitations or possibly working to our detriment. Next thing, a big word you're going to hear about today is context, because AI is all about having the right context to be able to give you the data that is appropriate for you. And then finally, trajectory. What trajectory are we on here? And if you want to ride this train, pick your analogy. If you want to head in the right direction with AI, where do you need to be moving? What do you need to be thinking about? And what are some of the resources that you need to be aware of? What I want you also to understand and setting expectation is you're not going to come away with this with a lot of definitive answers, because in the AI world, there are not a lot of definitive answers. We're at the very beginning of things here. I'll say this more than once. Things are going to evolve and change. So I don't want you to come away saying, oh, well, Ken said blah, 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 like I'm the expert, because as you're going to see here in just a second, I'm just learning like everybody else is. But where are we right now? We're living in a moment where AI is obviously reshaping every business function. There isn't anything it's not touching. At least there isn't anything that it shouldn't be touching. So when it comes to compensation design, the stakes are high because why? Well, missteps can be financially devastating, and they can also erode trust. It can erode your culture, a sense of fairness. So, like with everything else with compensation, we can't turn over to AI and think all of a sudden that we relieve ourselves of the responsibility for the human aspects of this, because that's where we run into problems. So what's the framing question we want to kind of answer today? Which parts of pay design should AI lead, and which parts should really remain kind of firmly in human hands? And we'll do our best at addressing some of that. So here's my two-part disclosure. I have good news. Then in number two, I'm going to tell you why that's good news. So the good news is I'm not an expert in AI. I don't know if any of you recognize that person on the right. If you do, just put a yes or no in the chat session. I'd be interested to know if any of you are familiar with who that character is. And if you can name them, you get extra points, if it were, extra credit. This might be your reaction to that. Oh no, great, I went to this session and this guy's not even an expert in AI. Well, here's, once you hear me out here, here's why that's good news. I don't speak the language of someone who's an expert in AI. I speak your language. So hopefully you'll see that as an advantage here. And I hope what I share with you will still be beneficial, even though I don't consider myself an expert per se. So I hope this is your reaction to hearing that I am going to speak your language, not the AI language today. So I would like to start off by getting some answers to some questions. This is going to be interactive. We're going to learn a little bit from each other. This is also kind of an audience assessment, if you will. The first question here, pick one of these four. Which best describes your feelings about AI so far? Now think about this in a business context primarily. Are you a skeptic? Are you cautious, but you are accepting? You're actually pretty excited about it. And the last one is you're up late at night trying to figure out the next thing you can do with it because you just can't get enough of all of this. So which of these would you describe yourself as? Okay, these a B, and actually somebody's a D. Well, maybe I should turn the microphone over to you and have you teach the rest of this course. Okay, B's, C's. Yeah, well, I'm happy to see there's nobody really here at A, and that's good because we're not in a place where we want to be a skeptic about. This is not going away. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to wait this out, and by the time I get to January of next year, this is going to be in the rearview mirror, and I can just go back to life the way it was before. I think we all know the genie's out of the bottom. That's not happening. Okay, the next question is below there. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your personal knowledge and experience with AI? And don't be overly rough on yourself, but I'm just trying to get a sense for how you view right now, based on your experience with it to date, how well you think you're doing with it. And 5 is the highest. It means if you're 5, you are kind of an expert. You're 1, you're really kind of getting started, and obviously 3 is someplace in between. Okay, good. Some of you are feeling pretty good about your knowledge and experience with this. So that's good. So now maybe you're in the session today because you're saying, I've experienced with it, but because of the position I'm in the company, I am trying to figure out what's the best way to be using this when I look at compensation. And Ken, I am concerned about the things that you said earlier. There is a lot of stake here if I'm not doing this the right way. Okay, next question. In your business, this is not just compensation related, but just in your business, how do you personally use AI most often? Using it for research would be A. B is data gathering, analysis, those kinds of things. C is process or strategy development. D is more on the kind of creative writing end of things. And E is kind of assessing and reviewing things you've done. You kind of check things with AI afterwards. Okay, everybody else jump in here. I see 1A. Everybody else has to answer. Come on, help us all out here. Where would you put yourself in terms of how you use it most often there? Some of you maybe that put numbers in instead of letters there. Okay, next question. This is different than the one I asked earlier, but it's similar. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate how much your company has embraced AI? So you look around at other people on your team, or in the company in general. You may be at a very large company, so maybe you look at your team, but if you're in a smaller company, what's the team's culture's attitude towards AI? How are they embracing it? Are they resisting it? Is it all over the place? What do you see there? So on a scale of 1 to 5, maybe take a minute there and plug that in. Rating your company's, how much it's embraced AI. Okay. Got a 5, I got a 3. Give you a minute. Come on. Anybody else want to answer that? How you feel about your company? One that really embraced it, one that's kind of in the middle there. Okay. Well, if you think of it, plug it in. It's helpful to see where we all are with this. Okay. Now, next one. What best describes the benefit that you're getting from AI? So think of it this way. I use it because it saves me time. I just feel more productive. I get more things done, or better. Increases my capabilities and bandwidth. It improves my creativity. It makes me better prepared and smarter. So which one of those would you describe as you right now? Okay, good. A lot of creativity here, productivity. And I think that's where we see a lot of this now, less maybe on some of the technical side of things. Okay, good. So we have a little bit more of a mixed bag here, but it is, what we're seeing here is that there is a broad range of ways that this can be an assistance to us. Now, if you could, in 5 words or less, describe the impact you think AI is going to have on your business. The word "your" is missing there. 5 words as you think about it, and this is a really important question. You say the impact, say over the next year, what impact is it going to have? You could say things like, I think it's going to increase our product development capabilities. I think it's going to improve innovation. I think it's going to improve our processes. I think it's going to save us money. I think it's going to bring our culture together. Just anything like that in terms of what impact you think it's going to have. Okay, good. Seeing some good answers here. Okay. Add value, make us more efficient. Software engineers need to upskill. You're going to see a lot of that out of AI for sure. Improve profit margins for our people from the mundane. I think that spoken like a true CEO. I think that's how a lot of CEOs are looking at it and should. Transform business operations, good. I think that's right. Yeah, these are great perspective. We have a very informed crowd with us today, and I'm hoping you've gotten a lot out today because you are the people we really want to talk to with all that we're doing here. Well, where are we then with all of this? I think when you look at that kind of evaluation and you look at the experiences you've been having so far and everything you've been reading and learning about and applying your business, I think the consensus, there's a consensus on a couple of fronts. Number one, we are at the very beginning. When I hear and listen to podcasts, really smart people that are involved with AI and technology, investing in it or developing it, they say, look, we're just at the very beginning stages. There's no, you really can't pick winners yet. The winners that are really out in front in terms of platform and stuff, they may not necessarily be so 5 years from now. You think about when the internet first came on the scene and people were developing browsers, before Google, nobody would have seen that, for example, maybe Netscape wasn't going to be the leader forever. Then Google shows up and all of a sudden everything changes. Well, then AI shows up and a lot of things change for Google as well. It's not going anywhere, and it certainly has embraced where these things are headed, but things have changed because of that. The second thing is opportunity in two contexts. Number one, those who will learn it will lead. There's just no question about that. But the second thing is we have to think about this as we're all in this together. When it comes to compensation in particular, it can never be an HR against the CEO in terms of philosophy and commitment and so forth. There's got to be a sharing of ideas. There's got to be a coming together in conversations and how we're going to use it and what the priority is going to be and so forth. But those that are willing to invest the time, the person that said in there, yeah, he or she is up late at night trying to learn the next thing with it. Well, have some downtime too, but getting ahead of the curve is not going to hurt you. That's for sure. So a key insight that I gained in preparing this, one of the things I read was this: AI is not here to replace strategic pay design. It's here to augment it. It's here to bring the human and the technology together and leverage then the best of both things. AI now can bring out of the human things that the human couldn't do itself. But the AI cannot do it without the human, and we'll talk about why that is. So as we're entering this phase, the appeal and promise is kind of apparent, and some of you have probably experienced this. You can look down that list, scale and speed as it relates to certain, processes and data and so forth, bias detection and pay equity issues that people are dealing with these days. Lots of ways AI is being used now to accelerate your ability to assess where you are with that and or detect where you are with that so you don't run into problems. Operational efficiency and decision support, human-centric AI philosophy, HR and comp design. This whole human-centric idea as relates to AI is so critical right now. Is how do you use AI to make sure now you are more human in what's being done, and you have the data that tells you what needs to be done next and how you can improve in that regard. So if we want to understand the limits and opportunities, it's important that we start with a foundational understanding here. I'm going to give a shout out to Dharmesh Shah, the co-founder and CTO of HubSpot. At Inbound a couple of weeks ago, he gave a keynote address there, and he really broke down kind of how AI works. You go to YouTube and you plug in Dharmesh Shah Inbound 25, you'll find it. It's about a 30-minute watch, and he's just excellent, first of all, in this area, and really helping you understand. You're going to see a little bit of that today. I'm going to summarize some of that. But this foundation is really critical as to where you're going to go, I think, in making decisions about how you're going to use it to help you with comp. So one of the points he makes, and the thing that you observe, is that this is the trajectory AI is on. This is what they call an exponential curve. So 3 weeks from now, what the capabilities are going to be very different than they were today. That's why we have to stay ahead of it, constantly digging, constantly learning. But what are we comparing against? We're comparing that against the learning curve, right? And that's why there are so few experts right now. It's very hard to keep pace with where things are going because the machines are way out ahead of us. But that differential there is also an opportunity on a whole bunch of levels, right? It's an opportunity, I think, as Chad Perry pointed out earlier today, to really differentiate yourself as a company if you get out ahead. And if you build this in to what you're doing, and so it becomes a native part of what's happening. It's not something, oh, by the way, we're doing just to be more efficient. It's built into what we're doing. Well, the same thing when you think about everything from recruiting to training to onboarding to how you think about compensating people and how you think about reporting on those things, how you think about analyzing data on those things. The quicker you can close that gap, the better off that you will be. So LLM, of course, stands for large language model. But what does that mean in terms of what we need to understand as we use it as a tool in AI? Well, a large language model, if you want to think about it this way, if you think about it like there was this great big machine out there, and inside that machine, there was hundreds of billions of knobs going on in there. And those knobs were these things that were doing this computation for you. Well, what happens because of what's going on inside this large language model, we'll call a machine for lack of a better term right now, is something that's called next token prediction. That's what is happening. It's important to understand this terminology because it's a clue to why you have to be careful about how you're using AI and what its limitations can be, but also where its power is coming from. So if you plug something into an LLM, something simple like the toddler built A, and you ask the LLM to complete that, it's going to come up with an answer for you. The toddler built a tower in this particular example. But why does it say the toddler built a tower as opposed to something else? Well, it's a non-deterministic process that it's going through. The way that these tokens are working, there's so much going on in real time and so much data being gathered that you could do this, go through the same process 30 seconds later and come up with a completely different answer. Why is that? We're going to talk about why that is in just a minute. It's because of the context that the LLM is being given and the data that's coming into it. Some of that data is coming from you. Some of that data is coming from a lot of different places, but it's based on something we call next token prediction. All of these little modules in there, these little knobs, as I call them, are going through a process of making a prediction about what should be the answer now or the end of this sentence in that example. Well, that makes things exhilarating and also kind of terrifying at the same time, because one of the things that we're learning about AI is that it is moving so fast that sometimes it can't keep up with itself, right? So if you're exploring certain data, one of the things you're probably discovering is, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, is that you have to know how and when you can trust that data. And if you rely too heavily on the models out there to do things for you and you don't have checks and balances, then you're going to run into problems. So LLMs deal in probabilities, they don't deal in absolutes. And that's one clue as to what you have to think about when it comes to compensation in particular is very seldom when you're looking at anything are you dealing with an absolute. So there always has to be a human component involved with what's going on. Dharmesh used this phrase. He said, LLMs are like autocomplete with a PhD in everything. And it's a cute way to think about it. He says, because a lot of people, particularly when AI first came on the scene to describe the shorthand, they say, well, it's basically autocomplete. And he says, well, that's kind of true, but it's true like this. And what we have to understand then is it's a tool, and there is this, we'll call it the silo that we're feeding things into, and it's going out and it's gathering all of this data and so forth. But what needs to happen? That LLM needs to be trained. So to use a football analogy, we're in football season right now. You bring your team together. You had, if it was in the college environment, you have people who came through the portal. You have a system in place. You have outcomes you're looking for, game plans you want to develop, and you have to really get some fundamentals established, or what? Or you're going to have players not running the right routes when passes need to be thrown to them. You're going to have linemen that are not going to know when they need to pull to make a block as opposed to stay where they are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, these LLMs are no different. The training that goes into them are going to be critical. So Dharmesh borrows, Steve Jobs' line, 1,000 songs in your pocket when he developed the iPod. Well, this is 1,000 PhDs in your pocket. So what you have to be able to do then is decide which of those PhDs am I going to be wanting to listen to, where do I get them, and how do I make sure that I'm getting the right kind of interaction from them that I want. So this means you're going to need to have the right blend of both compensation and AI understanding. So somebody that's great in compensation but doesn't know anything like I just talked about AI is going to run into problems. Somebody that knows a lot about AI but doesn't know anything about compensation is also going to run into problems, right? So the two need to work together, and you need people that understand both working together. So you need to know what role you want AI to play in your planning process, and you need to know how well trained your AI model is, so it will provide the outcome that you're looking for. So you need to be able to recognize when AI is giving the wrong or an inadequate answer. And you either know that because you're really great at AI, or you know that because you're really great at comp. But in both cases, there is a huge human component that is required. So what Dharmesh refers to this as, all this input we're talking about is creating what's called a context window in AI. So this is the person, and you're going to input all of this information, and it's going to come out now with these responses and all of the stuff that it wants to do for you. So how is that context being created? Well, it's creating some of it by itself, right? By going out there and getting information that's available for it to get. But also, just like I said, you're bringing it into training camp for your company and determining, how do I need to train this with the right context so that the output now fits what it is that we're trying to accomplish here? Now, not all of that is data-driven. Not all of that is mathematical. Not all of that is even accessible by going out and gathering lots of data out that's available out there for what other companies are doing. Why? Because you have a unique culture, and culture is not copyable. Therefore, culture is supposed to be and should be a competitive advantage. And one of the ways it's a competitive advantage is because of the unique environment you've created, not all of which can be captured by an LLM, and by gathering the right kind of data and doing it so quickly. So to build that context window, what becomes critical? Well, it becomes critical then, if we're going to learn AI and how to use it in comp development, is doing lots of research about what kind of prompts we should be using. We can talk to AI about what kind of prompts we should be using. And we can say things like, if this is the outcome I'm looking for, what kind of prompt should I be putting in to get that kind of output? And AI can help you with that. And it's an iterative process. You go through it over and over and over again. And what you put in today and what you put in 3 weeks from now is probably different because of the accelerated pace at which those are training. The next thing it's going to do is going to gather archive. It's going to capture and keep track of all of the stuff you've been putting in over a period of time, add it to everything else that's gathering out there. And as a result of that, build a context for you, a predictive context for an answer that it wants to give you. But it is predictive. It's not absolute. You have to keep that in mind, and it's going to continue to grow in its ability to make those predictions. It's also going to take in all of the resources you give it. It's going to take input from all of your PDFs, your spreadsheets, your images, anything else you want to do. So you have to decide, okay, what's the context I want to build here? To use my football analogy, what do I want my players to know about what we're doing here and how we're doing it, about why we're doing it that way? And what information do they need to be able to come to practice the next day and get the kind of outcomes I'm looking for from them? And then we're going to also give it access to all these tools that can help it now either apply that information the way we want it to, or continue to accelerate its ability to produce the answers that we're looking for. So these are the 4 things now that are going to create this context for us in the AI that we're using. So this now becomes the source of our power and opportunity, as well as what? As well as our limitations and risk. Because if any of these things we're not doing correctly, and we're making too many assumptions about them, well, we're creating risk for ourselves, right? And as we said at the beginning, there's a lot at stake there. At the same time, if we can get this right, and we can harness the power that exists because of this, what this machine can accomplish for us, then the power is really unlimited. It's like there's no gravity anymore in terms of what we can accomplish for what we're doing. So where does this place you in all of this? What are we talking about? Well, we have these tokens then. That's what all of this analysis is going on in front of this, inside of this LLM for us. We're building this whole context out of those tokens and how they're being processed and so forth. And who are we? We're the ones that are controlling all of this. And so that's a very powerful position to be in. it's also kind of a scary one, and we can't shy away from it, and we have to lean into it, and we have to understand what the risks are. We have to understand what the risks are of doing it, but we also have to understand the risks of not doing it and what it would mean in our ability to develop the culture that we want, the kind of employee experience that we want, the kind of ROI we want in compensation. These things can help us with that, but only if we understand the parts that we have to deal with and we don't completely turn it over and we learn how to control these mechanisms. So a snapshot then of the promise this is giving us is probably becoming obvious. One is its data power. It can process massive amounts of compensation data sets at scale if we need it to. If what? Well, if we give it the right data sets, we give it access to the right data sets, and we have to be careful of that because depending on what you read or hear, you hear things like, often 50% or more of the data that you get from AI that's serving up could be inaccurate if you have not what? If you're not learned to give it the right context, give it the right prompts so it knows the kind of authoritative data that you need and what those sources need to be. And so it gets it from the right places and it can accelerate your ability to analyze it. Market benchmarking and what to do with data once you have it. Pay equity analysis. This is a huge issue right now, particularly since we have to become more and more transparent with it. And then predictive analytics, understanding what we need to do next, forecasting things like attrition and the pay for performance correlations. Are we seeing the right relationship between how we're paying our people and how they're performing? That was pretty laborious to try to do. Lots of surveying going on, observations. There's a lot that can be done now with AI to help us with those things. So the snapshot of the promise here, and I keep coming back to this graphic about where you sit in all this. This is from Gartner. It says AI will transform HR, but compensation leaders need to know what AI can actually do versus what it promises to do. And this is what we've been talking about. The promise is there, but only if we have the ability and understanding of how AI works, how compensation works, and be able to assess when are we getting the right thing here and when are we not, and who needs to be looking at it so we get the right answers. On the limitation side, what's our snapshot? Well, there are nuances in human motivation. So you can have data that can tell you what all the companies in your industry are doing in terms of how they're allocating their pay and how much emphasis they're putting on a long-term incentive plan component versus a short-term, for example. But your employee population may be completely different than most of your competitors, for example. A lot of it may be Gen Zers, and they're not thinking long-term at all. So you have to be able to understand these kinds of nuance. Strategic alignment. AI is not going to necessarily tell you, don't know what happened, there we go, not necessarily going to tell you whether or not this aligns with your company's strategy right now. It's business model. Those are human things that have to be evaluated. Now, once you give it the right input, the right context, it might be able to help you with that and accelerate your ability to do that, but it's not going to do it automatically. All these contextual trade-offs that we've been talking about, balancing short-term versus long-term, there's judgment involved with those things. And then ultimately how these things are communicated and the trust you build in doing that, you got to be able to stand up in front of your people and say, this is where the company is going. This is the group of people that's going to take us there. This is why I think they can do it. This is how you're going to be rewarded for doing that. And if you're recruiting a new person, you need to have a conversation with them that says, this is really the purpose why our company exists. This is why we do what we do. And this is our vision for where we're going. This is our business model and strategy for how we're going to get there. This is your role in that business model strategy. This is why we think you're critical in that role. Now, if you do that and you fulfill the outcomes we want you to in that role, this is how you're going to participate. This is the value sharing we're going to do with you for the value creation you have made financially because of that. And this is what that means for you. Prospectively, this is what that's going to mean for you down the road. You're going to participate in this plan, this plan, this plan. So this is not just a $170,000 salary position you're being invited to participate in. This is a $1.5 million opportunity over the next 5 years if everything goes the right way. Now, AI helped you build a model that showed them that, but AI doesn't have that conversation, doesn't bring that passion to it, and doesn't build that trust with that person and help them understand why they're critical to the purpose and mission of your company and where you're going. The limits of AI and pay design. This is from Pay Scale. This is actually from a few years ago. A great quote. If you aren't talking with your employees about pay, chances are they're talking to each other and creating their own story and going online and getting information and going to AI and getting information and running their own models and making their own conclusions about how they should be paid and so forth. So again, these are the things that we need to be aware of and get ahead of. So again, summary, where is it helpful to us? It's efficiency now in giving those gains in automation, giving us the insights and forecasting we need, kind of the governance and compliance issues, decision support, highlighting kind of what the outliers are, where the inconsistencies are, but for what? For leadership review. So leadership can make assessments about where things need to go next. AI plus human is most helpful always. It's not one or the other, and it's never going to be one or the other. HBR said AI can flag pay gaps, but only leaders can decide how to close them. So again, I keep coming back to this graphic where you sit in all of this. You are never taken out of that equation, and if you ever are, then we have businesses being run by machines and by machine learning, and it's neither strategically advantageous or humanly wise to do that kind of thing. In a summary sense, where is it unhelpful? It can't define value creation for you. You have to set those thresholds. What are the thresholds we need to meet before we're willing to share value with our employees? Do we have a standard? Do they understand what that is? You have to have that conversation described earlier. We call that developing a growth partner relationship with your people. Your compensation should be the mechanism you have to create a unified financial vision for growing your business. That's not all done by AI. That's having a philosophy that our people are our growth partners. It's not just about compensation. It's about every way we treat them. It's about the experience we create for them. But it is about how we define the financial relationship with them, and AI is not going to define that. It's about balancing incentives. We talked about that. It's about storytelling. That's the example I gave earlier, the person that you just onboarded. And it's in the starting point there, it's about your philosophy. What do you believe about the way people should be paid? What should lead to increased earnings in your company? That should form a pay philosophy that drives everything you do. And AI should not be writing your pay philosophy for you. It can probably gather a whole bunch for you, give you some ideas, but you shouldn't cut and paste it because that really comes from you. So just some things in conclusions to think about here about where it's helpful, where it's not. Analyzing, yeah. Interpreting, yes. Ensuring fairness, no. Making strategic decisions, no. Compensation is not just a number, it's a narrative about partnership, purpose, and growth. And so you have to keep that in mind as you use AI for what you're doing. What's its promise? Speed, equity, prediction, automation. Those are things that we've talked about. It's all about having this, weighing this, the data we're getting, and can we trust what we're seeing? And when you do that, is that chart on the right. You understand that context window. What's happening in that context window and the output it's getting. And the very left there's where you see you. All of that is that training that you give it. And to the extent that you're committed to that and doing that the right way, you'll be in good shape. How is AI being used right now in current use cases? 32% are using it for salary benchmarking, 29% for pay equity analysis, 24% for analysis of current survey data, 21% for incentive optimization. And these are the kind of helpful use cases that these are the different platforms people are using, what they're using them for. These slides are going to be available to you in the CEO playbook, and my time's about up. So let me wrap up here. It's just kind of a summary then of where the opportunity is: data-driven decision-making, enhancing pay equity and transparency, streamlining operational efficiency, integration with performance management, personalized compensation strategy. These are all the things that can leverage our ability to use AI better, but it has to be in this context, understanding how it works and where you fit. Hopefully we achieve that goal for you, give you some perspective, some understanding, some context. You understand the trajectory we're on. We have these, you heard this at the very beginning if you were there, we have these 3 events going on in the 4th quarter here in October, November, and December. You'll hear more about this later. You'll see a survey that asks if you want us to sign you up for the first one on October 23rd. Building a value creation compensation. These are all under the umbrella of transforming pay into a growth driver. We're breaking it down into those 3 parts. So join those if you're able. And I took up all of our time. I apologize I didn't leave more time for questions. They're plugged in. I'll get them. I will follow up with you afterwards. And thanks for being with us. And please join that the next breakouts in the closing session, and hope you have the great rest of your breakout. Thanks, everybody.